So welcome back to the channel. If you've been watching any of my videos, you know that I am in the planning stages of retirement. I plan on retiring early, starting off semi-retirement and then fully retiring sometime after that. Now, in doing so, I watch a lot of YouTube videos of people that have done similar stuff, people that travel full-time, sometimes people that are of my age, and there's four channels I seem to gravitate to every week, and channels like Kara and Nate, Patty Doyle, Grounded Life Retirement, and Brian and Carrie. Now, just recently, Brian and Carrie did a video and they asked 12 questions to their viewers, and they were looking to get answers from people that watch their videos. So I'm doing this video to answer their questions and maybe give everyone that watches my channel kind of an insight as to what other people are thinking in their travel and what I'm planning for my travel. So here we go. And the first question is?
So the obvious first question is, are you planning on traveling this year, or are you going to sit this one out?
So yes, I do plan on traveling this year. Now, I am not retired yet, so I have a limited amount of time that I can travel. However, I do have a job that allows me to take roughly 10 weeks off a year, and most of that time is taken during the Canadian winter. For anybody that doesn't know, I live in Canada, and the winters in Canada are brutal at best. So anywhere from end of October until end of April is typically when I try to do my travel. So the short answer is yes, I do plan on traveling this year, and I don't really have any destination quite in mind yet. I just know where I won't be traveling. We'll move on to question number 2.
So now the next question would be, are you planning, if you are going to be traveling, are you planning to travel internationally, or maybe you're just choosing to stay domestic and travel closer to home?
So I've traveled domestically a lot in the last 15 years. I've traveled all over Canada, not quite all over the US, but a fair amount of the US. However, if you've watched one of my recent videos, I have basically refused to travel anymore in the US because of the situation going on down there. So obviously I'm going to be traveling international. I have a few areas in mind. I'm thinking Central or South America as of right now, with Asian trips planned in the future. So let's move on to question number 3.
Mm-hmm. Which leads to our question number 3. If so, is it because of inflation? Is it what you can afford to do?
So inflation, I'm not really concerned too much with inflation. Obviously, shortly after the pandemic, inflation shot up and stuff did get really expensive at one point. But it seems to have settled down now, and some places are getting a little bit more expensive than what they were pre-COVID, but no, I'm not really too concerned about inflation. So what's question number 4?
Now number 4 is going to be, are you getting tired of all the hidden fees that come along with travel?
As far as hidden fees goes, I try and keep an eye on what I'm paying for when it comes to flights and accommodations. And for accommodations, there can be some hidden fees, but typically you can find them out beforehand. Tourist fees, recreation fees, countries, travel fees. There is a number of fees that have been popping up over the years, but again, I'm not too concerned with paying them. Obviously, I'm traveling to their country, and I'm using their resources. I'm using their water, power, everything else while I'm there. So I'm not concerned about paying fees, and I kind of expect to pay those kind of fees when I'm in other countries. Let's move on to the next one.
This next one is sad but true. Airline safety, there's been so much in the news lately about plane crashes, our folks up in the airline towers.
Am I afraid to fly? No, not really. I've been flying since my teenage years. I've had some rough flights here and there. However, saying that, like Brian Carey said, there is a lot of stuff in the news, but at the same time, there was a stint there for a month where there seemed to be a lot of issues with air traffic and the odd plane crashing and stuff like that. However, for the last couple of months, there hasn't been really anything in the news. So I'm not really afraid of flying. However, I do get a little nervous when flying in the U.S. just because of what's going on down there and the current administration's cuts to pretty much every national safety department that they have for the sake of handing over more money to billionaires. But no, I'm not afraid to fly. So what do we have next, Brian and Carrie?
Are you worried about being stopped at border patrols or crossings and being detained and questioned?
Am I worried about customs? No, I'm not. I don't mean for people to take this the wrong way, but I'm a 51-year-old white guy and that did most of his traveling to the U.S. I've never ever had a problem with immigration or going through customs, and that may change when I start traveling internationally, but as of right now, for the travel that I've done in North America, no, I'm not really worried. No, obviously there is some horror stories in the news, but again, it's not really a concern of mine. Okay, on to the next one.
So that leads us to number 7. Do you feel like your freedom to travel is shrinking?
Do I think my freedom to travel is shrinking? Sort of, I guess, when it comes to, obviously there's places in the US where I would like to travel that I haven't been to yet. However, I guess the current administration down there is kind of forcing me to rethink that just because of their policies. However, going to, I have no issues going to other countries. There are many, many other countries that are welcoming tourists during this time. Canadians are usually well respected around the world, and if you treat the people right, they'll treat you right. So maybe the U.S. should kind of take a lesson from that. All right, let's go on to the next question.
Are global conflicts changing maybe your choices of destinations that you're choosing to go to? There's a lot going on right now.
There's a lot going on right now.
Global conflicts. Well, I do kind of keep an eye on what's going on around the world. I don't live on the news channels. However, I try and keep aware of what's going on. And as of right now, I have no plans on visiting countries that are obviously in some kind of conflict or countries that are adjacent to those countries that are having conflicts. The only one that I am looking to travel to that would be kind of questionable would be Thailand, just because of Myanmar and what's going on there. However, I think it's not quite the ordeal that's going on in Ukraine or Israel. So I am aware of it, and I am kind of adjusting travel plans because of it. So let's move on to the next question.
As an American, are you concerned of how you're going to be treated when you're traveling abroad?
So obviously question number 9 does not really apply to me because I am Canadian. Now, I do have American relatives. My grandfather was American, and my mother spent most of her younger years in Florida. She grew up in Florida and Arkansas and those areas. However, again, that question doesn't really apply to me. I've never had a problem with people treating me different because of my nationality. Now, I understand that Americans could have this problem, and but at the same time, a lot of them, half of them, bring it on themselves. So yeah, let's move on to question number 10.
Something else that we've been reading in the news lately is the global warming and the changing of the weather patterns, hurricanes, earthquakes, that sort of thing. Is that something that you think about?
I am not really worried about natural disasters. Obviously, when planning travel, I typically don't try to travel places that are having, weather-related issues. In saying that, I have traveled in the U.S. before. I've driven through a number of hurricanes. I've experienced, not the worst of the worst, but some pretty bad stuff. Localized flooding, I've dealt with that before. However, I guess you could say I keep an eye on it, and obviously I'm not going to go plan a month-long trip to the Caribbean in the middle of hurricane season, or if there's Asian countries that are dealing with volcanoes or typhoons, I'm probably going to avoid those places. Again, I'm aware of issues in different countries as far as there are problems with climate and climate change. However, I won't necessarily not travel there. I'll just pick the good times to go there.
So the nomadic lifestyle, I don't think it was a fad, but it was something that came along. I think because of COVID, it became popular. It was obviously something before that.
Question number 11, I've put a lot of thought into, and I've experienced it a little bit. And obviously, I'm not nomadic at this point. No, I own my house. I have a job. I do take extended leaves at different times of the year. But do I think a nomadic life is sustainable? And I really do think it is. There's plenty of people out there that are doing it. Hopefully at some point I'm going to be one of those people. And the things that I consider to be important are planning. If you're going to do something like this, it's going to be well planned. And the other thing is you financially need to be able to do this. People that travel for 1, 2, 5, 10 years at a time need to have some kind of financial backing, a way to make money, a way to a plan on spending their money. I already have this plan in play. I've been learning how to invest in the stock market now for almost 20 years. I have what I think a pretty good handle on it. I do a extremely good return year after year. So once I am retired, when I semi-retire here in 51 months, I really have no issues as far as me being able to afford to do this lifestyle. So short answer, yes, with a caveat that not everybody will be able to do it, but as long as you plan for it and are financially stable to do it, then I believe, yes, it is definitely sustainable. Let's go on to the last question.
Is the tourism, like what they're talking about in the news of that over tourism, and some of these countries are feeling incredibly overwhelmed?
Now, this is something that I am concerned about, over tourism. And not necessarily for where I'm from, but for places that I would like to travel to. Obviously for people my age that want to live, below their means with the money they have, Southeast Asia is, one of the best places you can go. And right now, there's many stories and many YouTubers that are kind of fed up with the tourism over there, just because it is so crowded in spots, places like Phuket and Bangkok and Pattaya, Manila, places in Europe. Obviously, they're having to deal with, getting rid of Airbnbs and stuff like this. So, yes, I am concerned about it. I'm hopeful. I'm hoping that this whole tourist thing is going to calm down a little bit, just because, like Brian and Carrie said, because of COVID, everybody was cooped up for such a long time that once they were free to travel, a lot of people did go out and hit the roads hard, and it may slow down. Some places are already saying that the tourism numbers are starting to drop off a little bit this year, but we'll see. But it is something I'm concerned with, and I'm not one to be in big crowds of people. So I tend, when I plan a trip or plan a getaway, I try and find a place that's not super crowded. Like obviously a place like Phuket or Bangkok or Manila or even Panama City or places like that, I wouldn't necessarily stay, but obviously I'd look for somewhere outside of those city centers. Cities that are smaller cities, ones that ain't quite as touristy. But anyway, yeah. So there you are, Brian and Carrie. Those are your 12 questions and my 12 answers. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight. Again, I am not traveling full time yet, a couple months out of the year as of right now. But once I start traveling on a more permanent basis, maybe my answers will change. But for now, that's my thoughts. So anyway, we'll see you in the next video, and thanks for watching. If you could like and subscribe, that'd be great. And keep up with my content that will be coming out in the next few months. See you next time. Bye.